Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Robert Axson. He is the new chair for the Utah Republican Party. Robert, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you. I always enjoy talking with you, Glenn.
Well, I appreciate that. Let's get right into it. When you announced you were making a run, I sent you a text and I asked if you're crazy, and I was only halfway kidding. This is a job that takes a lot of effort. It's a volunteer. You don't get paid for it. It'll take a lot of your time. Why were you interested?
I'm glad you brought up the word volunteer. One of the things that Utah does best, we're always at the forefront or even at the top of the list of states that are most volunteer oriented. We volunteer the most hours, we engage the most on building community, and I think political participation within a political party is one meaningful way that we can build community and do that type of volunteer work. And so it is going to be an interesting couple of years. There's a lot that we're facing as a country and as a state. There's a lot that we need to engage in, even within partisan politics and with the party. It's not always going to be easy, but I think there's too much that we have to solve for Utah.
We will get into some of those priorities and your vision in a bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about this situation. The last 3 chairs before you have been one and done. That kind of hits to my point where this can be a thankless job. Do you see that as a sign of the times of what's happening, or what is it that has chairs, the last few of them, signing up for one term and saying, I've had enough?
Yeah, the last handful of years politically, even nationwide, but certainly here in Utah, have been very challenging. There's a lot of course, division that we're seeing as a country and within the party process. Ultimately, though, I think that we can solve enough questions for Utahns, not just Republicans, but general run-of-the-mill Utahns, that they'll see the Republican Party is serious about improving our opportunities and improving our way of life for Utah. That's a place where ultimately, whether I serve a second term or not, will be inconsequential, because we'll build a party that is strong enough that whoever takes over when I do leave, whatever additional party leaders, party advocates, and volunteers will be working towards horizon-level visions and horizon goals. It can't just be about winning elections next year. We have to be fighting for Utah 5 and 10 years down the road.
I'm glad you brought up that point about the division we've seen as a country, but also within the Republican Party. When you take a look at where the Republican Party is heading and how it differs from maybe when we were younger, what do you do? What steps do you take to try to make it more attractive to the bigger group of Republicans who some believe the party is starting to move away from them?
I think a big word, and it's one word, but it's a big idea, and the word is consistency. I think the Republican Party has to be consistent in not only talking about what it believes and educating people about what it believes, but we have to be consistent in showing up. If we never show up in a person's life, in their neighborhood, in their community, and yet we expect them to vote for our candidates, shame on us. And so our consistency of being there hand in hand, trying to fight for the future that they want for their kids and grandkids, that's where we'll be able to solve a lot of the challenges. And I think that's where we'll be able to get to what we both experienced growing up under a Reagan and early Republicans. It's this aspirational idea that there's a lot that we have to be proud of as Americans and what we can fight for. I think we can get back to that spirit. And will we still have different points of view within the party? Of course we will. But at that point, I think we'll be working towards that common vision, and the peripheral disagreements, while still pertinent, will not be the sole focus.
Talk about your background. This isn't your first run as an executive within the Utah GOP. Also, you've spent a lot of time working for Senator Mike Lee.
Yep, absolutely. So a few years ago, I was the state party vice chair when Derek Brown was the party chairman. During that period, we started off, we were $500,000 in debt. We certainly had a mountain to climb as it pertains to fundraising. We were able to retire that debt. Now I'm looking forward to what we can build. And so that experience I had of retiring the debt, I think prepares us now for what we do moving forward. And like you said, I spent quite a bit of time professionally working for Senator Lee. I was his state director for 7 years, had worked in D.C. prior to that. I know what it means to navigate the political waters. I also, more importantly, know what it means to continue to fight for Utah and all 29 counties.
Let's talk more about the top priorities that'll be coming over the next 2 years. A big election year coming up next year. What will you be working toward?
I think we have to build the party's structure so that it can be seen as being strong. Right now, if you ask a Utahn or anybody, is the Republican Party strong in Utah? I think there's three ways you can answer it. If you're talking about the brand, absolutely, the brand is strong. I don't think there's any Republican candidate for office or any elected official in Utah who was elected as a Republican who would want to see that R or that elephant disappear from their name. That brand is strong. There's a value to it. If you asked about the people of Utah, the people who consider themselves Republicans, the party is strong. But if you asked about the structure and the strategy and the data and the influence of the apparatus that is the Utah Republican Party, we've got work to do. And so that has to be the focus these next 2 years, is to make sure that when you ask yourself, is the Utah Republican Party strong? You can also answer about the party itself and say, yes, it's strong. Once you do that, then you can navigate the complex elections like the 2024 presidential election. We'll have certainly some compelling races here in Utah. You can navigate those while also engaging into new communities, younger generations, and whatnot.
I understand as your position, you can't get into a situation where you're talking about candidates specifically or endorsing candidates, but I do want to dig a little more into the 2024 election, because one of those issues that we talk about with the Republican Party being divided, a lot of that was centered around our former president, who is running once again. We've seen a lot of Republicans, elected officials and otherwise in the state of Utah, get behind other candidates and say, look, he had his chance, it's time to move on. His former director here in the state of Utah running his campaign has even said it's time to move on. Any thoughts when it comes to the presidential race that you can share?
Yeah, I think the critical thing, getting back to what I mentioned before of looking to the horizon, we need to be thinking about what we want the Utah Republican Party to be doing 5 years and 10 years and 20 years from now. If you're focused on those, you'll win elections along the way and you'll support candidates along the way. If, however, you become too myopically focused just on next year, we'll lose our way. And ultimately, as it pertains to Donald Trump and any of the other candidates for president, I'm looking forward as a Utahn to hearing what they prepare and plan on doing if they are to be victorious. If they're our next president, what will they do to fight for the conservative principles that have served Utah well? I think Donald Trump certainly can make that case, but so too can the rest of them. The big thing that we'll need to do as a party is to make sure that there is a fair and transparent process where Utahns have the opportunity to vet them through their nomination.
The SB 54, the signature path to the primary, has been a big controversial issue within the Republican Party, and it still is today. What will your approach be? We've seen a lot of effort, or some effort, I should say, to kind of chip away at that. How will you approach that?
I think it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I believe our caucus system is a wonderful process. It's one that has a door open to anybody who has an interest. It doesn't matter if you're from a well-connected family or if you have name ID or money, you can come and get involved through the caucus system. I think that's a beautiful process. I absolutely support it. As it pertains to what systems of laws the state legislature has given to us, I think we need to figure out ways to meaningfully move forward collaboratively. So it can't just be the stick over the head of the legislature to try to influence changes that we want to see as a party. We also need to have that carrot of encouragement. Here's what we can do as a strong party to kind of work around the edges and fix that process.
So do you still see a path for the signatures when it comes to
as of right now, that's state law.
nomination?
That's state law. And so as Republicans, we need to abide by state law, even if at the same time we're working to adjust that. But I think we can do that in collaborative ways and in encouraging ways that are built around what we agree upon. We don't have to only focus on those points of disagreement. Sometimes I think a challenge that folks have is if you don't have those moments of where you've worked together, it becomes a lot more difficult to get past where you disagree. Let's figure out those places where we agree, spend a lot of time there, and then on those disagreement points, we can approach it more productively.
So over the next couple of years, can you mend the party, so to speak, when it comes to that issue?
It gets back to that word of consistency. I think if we consistently show up and show the value of what our principles and platform provide, show the value of the service that Republicans are providing in all 29 counties, not only to candidates and grassroots activists and donors, but to elected officials as well, that's where you start to mend any divide that we have within the party. So you have to consistently show up.
All right. You have a big job ahead of you over the next couple of years. Appreciate your time here talking to us about your vision and what you would like to see happen. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Glenn. Good to be with you.
You bet.